Hi, Math Superstars. I hope everybody is having a wonderful day. Let's go over our superstar rules. Respect yourself and others. Listen carefully. Follow directions. Try your best. We are going to be learning about telling time today. I want to review with you first the parts of a clock. Now, this kind of clock is called an analog clock. An analog clock has a face, but not a face like a person. It has a face that has numbers on it. And the numbers go from 1 and then they go up until you get to 12. An analog clock also has hands, but they don't look like hands that people have. These hands are called the minute hand, that's the longer hand, and the hour hand, that's the shorter hand. I remember that by thinking the word minute is longer. So the minute hand is the longer, or you may have heard it called the big hand. The word hour is a little bit shorter. It only has 4 letters. And the hour hand, the little hand, is the smaller hand. Now, when you are reading a clock and you see that the minute hand is pointing to the 12, whenever that minute hand is pointing to the 12, we say o'clock. Now, to read the time that's on the clock here, we always start with the hour hand. Just like those baby ones always like to go first when we are adding or subtracting, that little hand always likes to go first too. If we're reading this clock and the little hand is pointing to the 2, the minute hand is pointing to the 12, we would say that this time is 2 o'clock. Now, you may also see 2 o'clock on a digital clock. You may see these clocks on your microwave or your oven. This also says 2 o'clock. There's a 2, then there's 2 dots, and then there's 2 zeros. That clock also says 2 o'clock. Some clocks you may see 2 o'clock written this way on a digital face, but some of them may do this. They may have a 0, then the 2, 2 dots, and then 0, 0. That also says 2 o'clock. Now, when the clock hands move around the clock, you're going to notice that this minute hand, when it travels all the way around the clock, the hour hand only moves to the next number. Watch. It says 2 o'clock now. If this minute hand goes all the way around, that means 1 hour has passed in minutes, and the hour hand has just gone 1 number or 1 hour. Now this clock says 3 o'clock. We read the little hour hand first because that little one always wants to go first. And then we read the minute hand when it's pointing to the 12 as o'clock. So this time says 3 o'clock. This clock says 3 o'clock as well. Let's try one more. Watch how quickly the minute hand will travel around the clock in 1 hour. That hour hand goes much more slowly to get to the next number. What time do you think this clock says now? It says 4 o'clock. Now, our I can statement here says, I can tell time to the half hour. Many of you are probably wondering why I have a circle that is split in halves on the page. That's because we can use what we know about fractions and about halves to help us understand time to the half hour. On the clocks we were just looking at, if the clock hand went all the way around the clock, if that minute hand went all the way around, it was 1 hour. If that minute hand only goes halfway around the clock, that means it's half an hour. So if the minute hand starts here and only goes halfway around, that's half an hour. Let me show you on this clock here. We're going to cut the clock in half. When that minute hand goes around the clock halfway, we say that that is half an hour. Now, when we read that, we can say 30 when it points to the 6, or we could say half past. So let's look at this clock. I want to look at that at that hour hand first. Remember, the hour hand is the little hand, and it always likes to go first. Now, if I draw and make it a little bit longer, I want you to look carefully at that. Is that hour hand pointing to a number, or is it between two numbers? It is. It is between two numbers. It is between the 2 and the 3. That tells us that it has not gotten to the 3 yet. It's not there yet. If it has not gotten there yet, then we have to start reading this time by the 2. We would say this time is 2:30, or we could say it is half past 2. This hand has not gotten to the 3 yet, so we would say it is 2:30 or half past 2. Let's look at another time. Let me see. All right, now watch our clock hands. Which clock hand do we read first? Do we read the big hand, which is the minute hand, or do we read the little hand, which is the hour hand? Think about who always wants to go first. That little hand, that hour hand. Now let's look and see, where is that hour hand pointing? Is it pointing to the 5? No. Is it pointing to the 6? No. It is pointing between the 5 and 6. That means it has not gotten to the 6 yet. So we have to read this starting with the 5. This time would be 5:30. The minute hand is pointing to the 6, so we say 30. This time would be 5:30, or we could say it is half past 5, because this minute hand has gone halfway around the clock. This hour hand has gone halfway to the 6. Let's try another time. Now let's look. Which hand do we read first? The little hand. Let's look at where the little hand is pointing. Is it pointing to the 6? Is it pointing to the 7? Or is it halfway between? It is halfway between. It did not get to the 7 yet, so we cannot read this as 7. How are we going to start reading this one? We are going to read 6. This time would be 6:30. The minute hand is pointing to the 6, so we would say 30. This time is 6:30, or we could say it is 6:30. This minute hand did not go all the way around the clock to get to 6:30. It went halfway around the clock. So we would say 6:30 or 6:30. Let's try one more. All right, now, which would you read first? The little hand or the big hand? That's right, the little hand gets read first. We don't read that little hand first. I like to say it's going to cry because the little one always wants to have the first turn. Now, let's look and see. Where is that little hand pointing? Halfway between the 11 and the 12. Did not get to the 12 yet, so we cannot say 12 first. What do we say? We say 11. This time is 11:30. The minute hand is pointing to the 6, so we would read that as 11:30 or 11:30. Now, before we go, I want to show you what time to the half hour would look like on the digital clock. This clock says 11:30. So does our digital clock, 11:30. Now, what time does our clock say it is? 12:30. The digital clock says 12:30. Let's look at our analog clock. This little hand goes first, but it did not get to the 1 yet. So we would read this clock 12:30. Or we could say 12:30 because this hour hand has gone halfway past 12, but it did not get to the 1 yet. Great job, superstars. Keep practicing telling time to the half hour.